The night of the latch. The night had started like any other. The fire in the fireplace was burning low, casting long, flickering shadows across the wooden floor. The scent of Abigail's stew still lingered in the air, thick with the aroma of onions and salted pork. The younger children had already been put to bed in the small loft upstairs. Outside, the prairie wind howled through the trees, rattling the shutters and sending dry leaves skittering across the porch. Letty sat in her usual spot by the fire, staring into the embers. Thomas watched her from his chair, his fingers curled tight around the armrests. She had been like this all evening, silent and distant. Something about the way she sat unnerved him. Her back was too straight, and her hands were resting stiffly on her lap. It was as if she wasn't even there. It was as if her body was in the room, but she was somewhere else entirely. Then she started whispering. At first, it was so quiet he thought he was imagining it, just a soft murmur beneath the crackling of the fire, barely more than a breath. Abigail noticed it too. She was darning a sock at the table, but her fingers stilled, her needle hovering mid-stitch. "Letty?" she said gently. Letty didn't respond. Thomas felt something cold coil in his gut. She was doing it again. "Girl, your mother's speaking to you," he said, his voice coming out harsher than he intended. Still, she didn't move. She didn't blink. She just kept whispering. James, who was sitting at the end of the table, shifted uncomfortably. "Pa, maybe she's just tired." Then Letty started laughing. It was quiet at first, a soft, breathy giggle, like a child telling secrets. But then it grew. Low, rolling laughter bubbling from her throat like something was crawling out of her. It was high-pitched, strange, and wrong. Abigail rose slowly from the table, her hands trembling. "Letty? Honey, what's—" Then Letty moved suddenly. One moment she was sitting by the fire, the next she was standing, her whole body rigid, her hands curling into fists at her sides. And then she screamed, a terrible, raw sound like an animal caught in a trap. At that moment, Sammy had just come down the loft stairs, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Mama, what's—" And at that moment, Letty turned. Thomas, who was sitting at the table watching everything, would never forget the look in her eyes. They were wide, unblinking, and wrong, as if someone else was looking through them. And before Sammy could even move or even take a breath, Letty lunged at him. She grabbed Sammy by the arm. She was too fast and too strong, and the boy yelped, his small body jerking sideways as she wrenched him towards her. Then she squeezed. A sickening crack. Sammy screamed. Thomas was on his feet in an instant, crossing the room with two great strides. "Letty, let go," Abigail shrieked, rushing forward, but Letty wasn't there anymore. Her mouth was twisted into something that might have been a grin or a snarl, or just nothing at all. Sammy sobbed, his little legs kicking, his face twisted in pain. Then Thomas grabbed her. His hands clamped onto her shoulders, and he ripped her away from Sammy. She fought and she kicked, her nails raked against his forearms, tearing through his skin. He threw her backwards, sending her crashing against the table. A plate shattered on the floor. The candle tipped, rolling to the edge before Abigail snatched it up, her breath coming in panicked gasps. Letty lay on the ground, breathing hard, her chest rising and falling in ragged heaves. Sammy collapsed into his mother's arms, sobbing into her shoulder. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, Letty went still. Her head lolled to the side, her eyes dazed and unfocused. She blinked, and with the softest, weakest voice, she whispered, "Papa?" Thomas stared at her. His chest was heaving. His hands still trembled with the force of holding her back. He had seen rage before. He had seen men lose themselves to it in drunken brawls, seen wild animals fight to the death. But this had not been his daughter. Something else had been inside her in that moment, something that was cruel, something that was angry. He turned away. "Take the boy," he muttered to Abigail. His voice was raw. Abigail clutched Sammy tighter, rocking him as he whimpered. Thomas took a slow, shuddering breath, then stepped forward, grabbed Letty by the wrist, and dragged her to the stairs. She didn't fight him this time. She barely even moved, her body limp in his grasp. He hauled her up, step by step, the floorboards creaking beneath their weight. When they reached the small room, he shoved open the door, threw her inside, and slammed it shut. His hands were still shaking as he slid the wooden latch into place. The finality of it echoed in his bones. It was done. The house was silent now, save for Abigail's soft murmurs as she comforted Sammy, James's heavy breathing, and the faint rustling of the wind outside. Thomas stared at the door, at the rough wood beneath his palm. He told himself that this was for the best, for Letty, for all of them. But as he walked back down the stairs, his gut twisted with something he didn't want to name. Because deep down, beneath the anger, beneath the fear, he knew. He had just locked his daughter away, and he didn't know if he would ever let her out again.